To Sahara TV. The Lakurawa terror group has emerged as a significant threat to the stability of Northwest Nigeria, exploiting intelligence frameworks' weakness, as well as porous borders and socioeconomic vulnerabilities to wreak havoc on communities. With us to take a deep dive into this discussion is the Executive Director of Africa's Morning Center for Public Policy and Good Governance. He's also a development professional and a public affairs analyst, Mr. Chima Kristen. Welcome to Sahara TV, sir.
Thank you so much for having me back on your platform.
Great. Let's take a deep dive. Can you briefly explain the current security situation in northern Nigeria, especially in the light of the emergence of the new terror group, IS Sahel, otherwise known as the Lakurawa group?
Well, it's new to a lot of you, but it's not new to us. This group has been operational for at least 8 years in Nigeria. It's just that they added media bent to it. And then they've been living peacefully, in quotes, with the locals. And that's how also they plant, and that's also how they recruit. They've been armed all this while. You're hearing about them now because they chose to tax the locals, and they chose to tax the locals. So it is in that the communities that refuse to pay that tax is the communities that they inflicted harm on, as a warning to other communities that may refuse their taxation. It may interest you to know that Nigeria's space continues to shrink. While Nigeria is still Nigeria in terms of landmass, the part of Nigeria that the government is able to reach is shrinking by the day. I think the right term for that is ungoverned spaces. You do have an increasing number of ungoverned spaces in Nigeria where Nigerian authorities can no longer assert their independence. And this is not just happening in the north, this is happening all over the country. So it is just that you're hearing of it now, but that does not mean that it's happening now. So yes, there are active zones in Nigeria where non-state actors tax the people, where non-state actors are the administrative authorities there. For instance, you won't see police stations there. They are policed by these quote-unquote terrorists, all right? And they have embedded themselves locals. They have understood the terrain. They have even recruited from the communities themselves, and they have a vast network of supporters, loyalists, vast network of informants embedded within those communities where they operate. So this is the situation as I see it, not just in the northern part of Nigeria, but across many parts of Nigeria.
Thank you very much. You earlier stated that this group has always existed, and the emergence now has actually raised concerns, not just among Nigerians themselves, but even security agencies alike. Let me ask, from your professional perspective, how does their emergence, I mean, at this point in time, alter the broader security dynamics in Nigeria?
Well, anyways, again, things don't just happen, right? The seeds of conflicts, the seeds of terrorism is always planted. I think the last time I was on your program, we discussed terrorism in the Middle Belt. Yeah. And I told you that there are active terror groups, sleeper terror groups in the Middle Belt. And that if you give them time, that between now and the next 8 years, that you will see what will happen if you don't address some of those legitimate grievances. And then if you don't cut that off. Yet Nigeria seems to find a way to delay troubles until the open manifestation of it. Nigerian security, they are not, surprised. Anybody who's known anything, you don't even have to be a security person. You just have to live around or visit to know that these people have been there. These people are embedded with locals. People know when they move out. People know when they come in. They are there. But it's just that they have not been, so to speak, that thing they say about playing with a tiger, that you'll always end up in its belly. Mm-hmm. So I think that the locals have been playing with it, have been housing them. All right. So when they start up newly, they don't have that operational capacity to carry out large-scale violence, right? So what they usually do is that they sit back, they watch, they do 1 or 2 raids to sustain themselves, they do 1 or 2 businesses, and then the communities begin to see them as champions. And that's why terrorists have local sympathizers, because initially when they come into any organization or any community, what they want to do is to make themselves the sole or the dominant armed group in that place. which means that if that community is suffering from pickpockets, they will drive them out of town. If they are suffering from all these, opportunistic, they will drive them out of town. So by doing that, the locals gain the confidence of the locals as presenting themselves as the new police, as the new government, as the new, oh, these guys are protecting us, they're protecting our farmlands, they're protecting us from cattle rustling. And then after a while, they will now begin to say, oh, we've been protecting you for a number of years now. It is now time for you to pay us tax for protecting you. And then when the community is saying, no, we're not going to pay tax, then you begin to see the kind of things that is happening. And that is what is exactly happening. These guys have been there all along. It's just that Nigerian authorities are beginning to wake up to not even wake up to responsibilities, but at least to acknowledge. So to me, there is no change in dynamics whatsoever. The number of armed groups in the north has not added by one since people started hearing of this Lukarawara or whatever it is that they identify themselves as. Nothing has changed, just that Nigerians are now beginning to pay attention to a problem that has always been there.
You talk about the community itself. What role do these local communities actually play in both the rise and, if possible, the containment of these terrorist groups? Is there a lack of cooperation between the public and the security forces, as some analysts have suggested?
Well, I think there's a mutual distrust. There's a distrust, not mutual now, because so usually when they pick their these guys are super intelligent, by the way, you give it to them. I've often argued that you need to have an above average IQ to be a terrorist. Make no mistake about it. People often think of terrorists as people who didn't go to school, whereas you could argue that a good number of their soldiers didn't go to school, but their commanders are well educated. Their commanders have this street intelligence. Their commanders, you need to have, in fact, as we speak now, after this interview, try leaving your studio and go and harass one or two people across your street. Try doing it and sustain it for 2 months. So you need to have an above average IQ to do terrorism for 8 years, 10 years, 20 years to evade authorities, right? So what they do is that they study vulnerable communities that they can plant themselves there. These are usually border communities. These are usually out of reach communities. These are places where there is no electricity. These are places where there are no schools. These are places where there are no access roads, pipe-borne water. There's little to no functional government presence. All right, they can't just come and plant themselves in Abuja or in Lagos or in Port Harcourt. They can't go to state capital. They don't start there. They don't even start from a local government capital. They start at the fringes, those forgotten areas, those hard-to-reach areas. So when these people come, already the communities are suffering from neglect from the Nigerian states. There's no state presence. They don't even know if they are Nigerians. The only things that get to them from the government is ballot boxes. Apart from that, nothing else. No roads, no water, no nothing, no school. And so when these people come, all right, they come, oh, we are armed, we just want a place to settle. And usually the community will give them a place to settle. All right, then they can farm, they can rear their whatever, they can start, buying up because they come with a lot of money. And then their injection into any community is like injection of life into the community because they start interacting with the community. Imagine, foreigners coming to a community with naira, with, they start purchasing things. And so over time, they build that trust with the communities. They understand the communities. Then even some young people in that community are now recruited into their fold. Some women are now recruited to offer them sometimes marriage, other times arranged consensual sex and all of those things because they have those needs. And then people supply them with what they eat, information. So by the time they embed and they get planted, now when Nigerian authorities come to tell those communities after 8 years, these are terrorists, are you now beginning to see that there's a problem?
There is indeed a problem.
They can operate from this community, go to a raid in another place, and come back and give their women money and offer them protection. So when the Nigerian authority that has been non-existent, mind you, comes back after 8 years to tell them that these people we've known for 8 years, we know their names, they buy from us, we buy from them, all right, are now terrorists, it becomes difficult for the Nigerian authorities to convince the people as to who the aggressor is and who the good guys are. So for many of those communities, the line is blurred. And that's what we're seeing. So when the government complains that people are not willing to volunteer them information, you have to sit back to ask yourself, why? Was there police presence before these guys came? If there was police presence, did the people trust the police or the military before these guys came? If there was an existing relationship between Nigerian police or Nigerian military before these guys came, how come the people now trust these guys more than they trust the Nigerian authorities? So I don't just blame communities. You see from what we know now that there is a lot of blame to pass around. But again, we're not here to pass blames around. We're here to state that Nigerian authorities must begin to stamp their presence in some of those communities, get them to feel that they are part of Nigerian state so that they can contribute to the progress and peace and progress of Nigerian state.
Talking about the need for the Nigerian authorities to actually stamp their presence, and let's look at the security and military response so far. In terms of the Nigerian military response, what more, from your professional expertise, needs to be done to tackle the threat of this terrorist group effectively? And one begins to wonder, is the Nigerian military stretched too thin across multiple fronts?
Yes, that's a good question. And I tell people that the seeds of conflict, like I've mentioned earlier, are not planted the day they manifest. All right. Nigeria has gradually divested in its military. Nigeria has gradually divested in its. Now, by divestment, I don't mean they give incremental amounts of money to these organizations, but comparatively, with the growth in population and with everything that is happening, you begin to see that nepotism in the military, in the police, that, of course, anytime you see their police staff college, where they train these people, the remuneration, the staff enthusiasm, and all of, so there are a lot of things going on within the Nigerian architecture, security architecture, that is not caused by the terrorists. It's not the terrorists that ran down our police system. It's not the terrorists that ran down our NIA. It's not the terrorists that ran down our security structure. It's not the terrorists that make nepotistic appointments. It's not the terrorists that make man-no-man kind of recruitment and the kind of training and kind of promotion. So all of these things are self-inflicted harm. That's on the operational capacity of the Nigerian state to respond. Meanwhile, if you now say, given the best scenario, that our staff are properly trained, our police resources are properly motivated, properly armed, then you talk about numbers. 2 days ago, the chief of defense staff, I think Musa, was quoted as saying in the office of the NIA, right?
Yes.
Yes, which one? Please remind me.
Nigerian Intelligence Agency.
Beautiful. He was quoted 2 days ago and published by the media as saying that the Nigerian state has received over 200,000 repentant Boko Haram fighters. Over 200,000. Now, if they claim that they've received over 200,000 fighters who are repentant, the question is how many is remaining? Because the entire Nigerian Air Force is 230,000. The Nigerian Air Force consists of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. There is 230,000. And you are telling us that you have a fighting force of 230,000 and you have received repentant fighters of 200,000. So the question must be asked, why is Nigeria minting this kind of terrorists? Now, if we have that number of terrorists, that suggests to us, or potential terrorists, that suggests to us that 230,000 cannot. As we speak, Nigerian military is actively deployed in at least 33 out of Nigeria's 36 states. And there is this state I'll leave unmentioned. I was in the state when they had a crisis. I've gone to study. And then there was a curfew. And the curfew was imposed by the state government, but enforced by the military in that state that I'll leave unnamed. And so I was out in the field when the curfew was announced. And then, so that means that they cut off all kinds of transportation for me to get back from where I was to the hotel that I was staying in. Now, guess what happened? No transport. So we had to trek. Now, something important happened. And this is me observing as a security, someone who studies this thing. I noticed that the military did not even have the capacity to enforce the curfew. Now, what they did is that from here, you see one military officer, just one. And then after 5 or 6 posts, you will see one again. After 5 or 6 posts, you will see one again. So that is because you can't have 6 people at a spot. So they don't even have the capacity to overwhelm a state. I was in Lagos during the last governorship elections, and I was in the Situation Room, and I saw Because what happened was that you were complaining about ballot box snatching, about thuggery, and all of those things that was witnessed in Lagos 2023. The police was stretched far too thin because the Nigerian state or the political actors had the capacity to mobilize thugs from every polling unit. Because what the police and the military cut off was cross-border crime. So you couldn't move from one place to the other. But if anything is happening in these polling units, the police did not have the capacity. At some point, we were calling the police, they were stretched far too thin. This is to show you the picture. Now, I'm not saying that what happened in Lagos, but assuming that these thugs in Lagos, assuming that these touts in Lagos, assuming that these cultists in Lagos, and which we know that they are armed, one day decide to go against the Nigerian state. Because what you have in Lagos today is a partnership between government actors or political actors and armed groups. And there seems to be peace. And any day, any spanner is thrown into that partnership, you begin to see rise. And when that happens, you begin to see full glare the operational inefficiency and the incapacity of the Nigerian state to assert itself as the dominant force. Meanwhile, at the philosophical level, people are now debating, is it justified to have the state as the only armed group? That question is being asked at the philosophical level, because you will say that it's the state that used to have the monopoly of violence. Now, political philosophers are asking the question, should the states have the monopoly of violence? Now, that question is still up in the air. Per Nigeria's laws, the law says that Nigerian state has the monopoly of violence, but operationally, in every theater, if you consider Lagos, the Lagos state does not have the monopoly of violence. There are touts, there are arbors, and the government recognizes their authority. In the Middle Belt, in fact, some terrorists or used to be freedom fighters are now actively in contract with the federal government to secure pipelines. In the Southeast, it is so. In the Middle Belt, it is so. In the northern part of Nigeria, it is so. So operational Nigeria has asked the question and answered this, that Nigerian state no longer has the capacity to be the dominant or the only. Now, what we are dealing with is, can we manage these things? Can we say, okay, you guys operate in this theater, but this is your limits? So it is in places where there is conflict that you see these things happen. So again,
what in your opinion should be done to what in your opinion do you think should be done to address it? Because just like you have analyzed, many security experts have also pointed out the corruption within the security agencies as a major hindrance to counterterrorism efforts. So in your opinion, what can be done to address this problem?
So we start with a political leadership that wants to address it. All right. I think Nigerians don't understand how important our government is and why we need to bleed and die, if need be, to have the proper government in place. When I tell people you must have a good government, they say, oh no, but they will kill us. And I say, if you don't have a good government, you will still be killed. Right? Terrorists are now slaughtering villages, killing people. What is the difference between death is death? And so if we will fight for a good cause, let us fight to put someone that we can call in the middle of the night in authority. Now, when those people get into authority, what they will do is gradual capacitation of our Nigerian security architecture. There should be gradual ramping up of the numbers, gradual ramping up of the laws governing them, gradual ramping up of the equipment, especially the IT component of the equipment, using technology to fight crime. There should be gradual reorganization. There should be, you can't do this in 5 years, believe me. You can't do this in 10 years, but we need to start, and we have not started. So when you start with that, to internally organize your security structure, then we will have to go back to the basics. We have to partner with faith-based organization. Look, there is no country in the world, I say it, including America and Israel, that has the capacity to contain more than 5% of their population if they deliberately choose to go violent. Even America. Now, what you do is that you create a law, you create a norm, and you create a body of citizens that want to willingly apply or comply to that law. And then you're now left with 2% who will always be devious. Those 2% is what your soldiers, your military, your police is for. But today, we seem to have a situation in Nigeria that produces more people who want to willingly sabotage our laws, who want to willingly do bad, who want to willingly go into kidnapping, into terrorism, into all of those other things. And then if you don't alter that system that mints terrorists, you can't kill your way out of it. Nigeria can mint more terrorists faster than the government can kill, and that's a problem. And so we have to partner with schools to find out what we're teaching our school kids, if at all we're teaching them anything, to find out what our faith-based organizations are telling their adherents. Because every Sunday our churches are full. Every Friday our mosques are full. What are we telling them? That after telling them that, they still pick up arms against the state. So something must have to be radically altered within what the faith-based institutions are doing and what our schools are doing. You want to create a population of people who want to be good, then you reserve your law enforcement to the 2% who want to test your law. But if you have a situation where even if 10% wants to do bad, they will totally overwhelm the system. And that's where we are today.
Now, earlier on, you mentioned the need for part of the security strategy to include technological solutions. And given the challenge in combating the groups like this, Lakurawa, do you believe Nigeria should embrace more technological solutions such as drones, advanced surveillance systems? And how do you think will these improve intelligence gathering and security operations?
So yes, if you study, yeah, definitely you need technology. The world is going tech, you have to go tech. And then even the guys that are doing this are increasingly going tech too, right? They're increasingly going tech. And so you have to fight tech with tech, maybe with superior tech, all right? So what you want to do is to use tech for your intelligence gathering and all of those things. But if you ask me, from where I sit and from what we know, out of Nigeria's security landscape, now, if you chop them up and divide them into groups, the intelligence gathering is the most efficient. I tell you this. The intelligence gathering of the Nigerian security structure is the most efficient. The most efficient. Make no mistake about it. Some of these times, some of these attacks are known in government circles weeks before they happen. What you now ask, now that we know what they want to do we have the capacity to respond or to forestall it? Okay. Do we have the political will to do so? Those are the questions I see. Do we have the capacity to respond? We know someone wants to come to our house to steal. Do we have enough burglar proof? Do we have enough things to keep them away? And then do we have the political will to do so? And on those two questions are where I see issues. Now, to prove to you that intelligence gathering is up and running, you start tweeting anything against Nigerian state, they will pick you up. Just type something and threaten the president. Use all the VPNs you can use in this world, they will pick you up in 2 days or 3.
Stated earlier that there have been talks about the need to employ mercenaries to help secure the region, considering the fact that the military themselves have been stretched far too thin. What is your stance on these, and are there alternatives that you foresee?
I don't see why Nigeria would not enlist the help of mercenaries to help them fight insecurity. By the way, the Nigerian government is already doing business with mercenaries. Okay. Take taxation, for instance. Hardly will you find any state government that their state IRS or internal revenue IGR service has the capacity to tax the people. They usually go to thugs, to touts, and to cultists to help them drive revenue. Hardly will you find any state in this country where the state government is not in partnership with non-state actors to be able to bring in revenue. I've told you there is this group by government that the government contracted to secure pipelines in the South-South. All right. So the government is already doing business with mercenaries. What are mercenaries? People who are armed, who can inflict their will on the situation, but who does not necessarily owe their allegiance to the state, that their allegiance is owed to whoever hires them per time. And this is what we see with taxation. This is what we see with oil facilities in some parts of the South-South. So I don't see why Nigeria will not engage military contractors to help them reclaim some territories in the short term, but this is a short-term approach, while we gradually ramp up capacity to be able to inflict or impose our will on the situation. By the way, hit and run will never solve the problem, which is what you see. Because I've just given you the numbers, that the numbers show that we don't have the capacity to hold territories. So what the state does is that there is a community, and then we hear that terrorists are in this community. So Air Force goes to do aerial bombardment, the military comes to do the sweeping, and then they go. If you do all that and you don't plant a police station there, once you leave, they come back. So Nigeria state has the capacity to do hit and run. So they attack this community, attack here, but after 2 weeks of operations, they go. And then the terrorists just come back. So when they hear that you are coming, if they have the capacity, they can withstand you. If they don't have the capacity, they can move out. And then after you are done with your initial gra, they will call you another place. Once they deploy you from this point to another point, then the problem happens. And then why is police stations closing up? Why are police stations closing up? Today, Nigerian police stations are closing or merging up because they don't have the capacity to withstand the kind of local terror that is on the ground. I can give you names of police stations in Anambra State where the police stations are now merging with the divisional police headquarters to be able, because the other police can no longer work. Because say that you have 29 officers per police station, and then in a community that has between 300 to 500 armed group terrorists, they can easily overrun the place. Today, policemen go to work with their uniforms in their pockets, in their bags. So that's the situation you have. So if you have this kind of dire situation, I don't see why you should not enlist external help pending the time you are able to assert your territory, your presence on the territory.
Great. Let me also get your perspective on this. Given that the terrorist groups like the Lakurawa have transnational links with IS and Al Qaeda factions, and that their activities, especially in northern Nigeria, are facilitated by porous borders with countries like Niger, Mali, and Libya. How important is international cooperation in addressing this growing threat, especially in the Sahel and across West Africa?
That's you just need to look at the map of Africa, or just invite your audience to look at the map of Africa to appreciate the next point I'm about to make. Nigeria is bordered by, for instance, if you go to the south, you see Cameroon, you see Chad, you see Niger, you see Benin Republic, and then you see we don't have a direct border. But now, if you go further up, you will see Mali, you see Algeria, you see Libya, you see Egypt, you see Sudan, and you see Central African Republic. Now, why can't Nigeria and ECOWAS? I can't understand the issue with ECOWAS and the AES. Just because they are military men in authority does not mean that these are no longer our brothers. I don't see why ECOWAS will be playing a dangerous brinksmanship with the AES, the Sahel region. Now you have Burkina Faso, you have Chad, you have Niger, you have Mali. Yes, they have military dictators. But you shouldn't cut off diplomatic relationships with them or even threaten to go to war with them. Now, these people can help you secure your borders. These people can help you fight cross-border crimes. But again, Nigerian authorities seem to be thinking different. And so you have a lot of cooperation to do to fight this. Now, look at the threats coming from Chad. Look at threats coming from Niger. Look at threats coming from Mali. But then if you just cut off, you see that Nigeria is just Niger and Chad away from Libya. Nigeria is just Cameroon away from Central African Republic. Nigeria is just Chad away from Sudan and South Sudan. So you see, these are all open theaters of armed conflict. How then do you expect that they will not be exported? Then if they are exported, how then do you not want to partner with the authorities in those places? By the way, a government that is recognized by their people is a government. The people of the Sahel region recognize the government in Ouagadougou. They recognize the government in Niamey. They recognize the government in these states, in these capitals. Why then will ECOWAS insist on not recognizing them? And then because of that, you are having issues. So again, I don't know what our authorities are doing, but again, I will still bring it back to the first point I made earlier. We must strive to take a hold of our government, because some of these problems cannot be solved at the individual level. You must solve it collectively, and the government holds the majority of the tools and instruments of enforcement in this kind of discussions.
Finally, do you foresee an end to the insurgency in the north anytime soon, or is this conflict likely to persist unless deeper structural reforms are made? And from your perspective, what steps should be prioritized in the coming months to stabilize the region?
I foresee an end to it, and then the end will be shorter and faster than many people think. What you just need is a leadership that is focused, a leadership that is people-driven, a leadership that wants to. For instance, Nigeria is not an outlier here. You've had countries who have had. Look at, for instance, Bukel, Kai. I've forgotten the name of this country in South America that has a young president. Well, look at Argentina. Look at what is happening with Argentina with just one government. And look at what is happening with, it's not Ecuador, I've forgotten, but the name of their president is Nayib Bukele or something. You look at what is happening there with just one government. Nigeria is only one government away from total redress. A government that is people-oriented, a government that will roll their sleeves and go to work for the people. When you have that government in place. So I'm no longer trying to advise a government that is not listening. So because when people call on these programs or bring us up here, they say, what advice are you giving to the government? Is it a government that wants to listen or not? The problem is not that they don't have good ideas. The problem is just that they are not interested. Right? That's not their priority. As we speak, the priority is now 2027. The priority is now to consolidate power. So whatever happens to the citizen is not the priority. When we have a president who will not sleep until Nigerians have eaten, when we have a president who will not sleep until Nigerians are protected, when we have a president who will not go to bed until he solves the problem, then that's a good place to start. Now they will begin to, because countless experts have studied these issues. And then, believe me, the recommendations are on the archives. There's no president that is, once you become a local government chairperson, you have access to quality ideas, let alone being the president. The question is, do you want to implement? Are you interested? Are you interested in other things? And I believe sincerely that the people we have in power today are interested in some other things. When we have a government that is interested in us, believe me, they'll begin to solve the problems.
The Executive Director of Africa's Morning Center for Public Policy and Good Governance, Mr. Chima Crispin, thank you so much for your interesting and insightful perspective.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, sir.